The 75mm pack howitzer M1, redesignated the M116 in 1962, was an artillery piece used by the United States. It was designed in the 1920s to meet a need for a howitzer that could be moved across difficult terrain. The gun and carriage was designed so that it could be broken down into several pieces to be carried by pack animals. The gun saw combat in World War II with the United States Army, primarily used by airborne units, with U.S. Marine Corps, and was also supplied to foreign forces. In addition to the pack/air portable configuration, the gun was mounted on a conventional carriage to serve as a field artillery piece. The M2 and M3 are derived vehicle-mounted howitzers used in the 75mm HMC M8 and some LVT models. In addition, the M1 in its original version was mated to a number of other self-propelled carriages, though only one of those 75mm HMC T30 reached mass production. Development and production. The 75mm pack howitzer was designed in the United States in the 1920s to meet a need for an artillery piece that could be moved across difficult terrain. In August 1927, the weapon was standardized as howitzer, pack, 75mm M1 on carriage M1. Due to meager funding, production rates were low. By 1940, only 91 pieces were manufactured. It was not until September 1940 that the howitzer was put into mass production. By then, the M1 had been succeeded by the slightly modified M1A1. Production continued until December 1944. The only significant changes during the mass production period were carriage improvements. The original carriage M1 was of box trail type, with wooden wheels. The requirement for a lightweight howitzer for airborne troops led to the introduction of the M8 carriage, similar except for new wheels with pneumatic tires. Another requirement, from the cavalry branch of the U.S. Army, resulted in a completely different family of field howitzer split trail carriages M3A1/M3A2/M3A3. However, only limited numbers of the M1 field howitzer variant were built, due to cavalry's switch to self-propelled guns. Description. The howitzer M1 or M1A1 consisted of tube and breech, which were joined together by interrupted threads, allowing for quick assembly and disassembly. 1/8 of a turn was required to connect or disconnect tube and breech. The tube had uniform, right-hand rifling with 1 turn in 20 calibers. The breech was of horizontal sliding block type, with continuous pull firing mechanism. The recoil system was hydropneumatic. Both recoil buffer and recuperator were located under the barrel. The pack howitzer carriage M1 had dismantling construction. The carriage was of box trail type, with steel-rimmed wooden wheels. For transportation, the howitzer M1 or M1A1 on carriage M1 could be broken down into 6 mule loads, with payload weight between 73 and 107 kilograms each. Tube, breech and wheels. Top sleigh and cradle. Bottom sleigh and recoil mechanism. Front trail. Rear trail and axle. The carriage M8 was identical, except for axle arms and wheels, which were metal with pneumatic tires. The howitzer on carriage M8 could be broken down into 7 mule loads or into 9 parachute loads. The latter arrangement included 18 rounds of ammunition. It could also be towed by vehicles such as 1/4-ton Jeep, or transported by plane or gliders such as CG-4 Waco. The field howitzer carriages of the M3 family were non-dismantling, split trail. All these were fitted with metal wheels with pneumatic tires, all had an additional retractable support, referred to as a firing base. In firing position, the firing base could be lowered and wheels raised, leaving the weapon to rest on the firing base and trails. Organization and service. U.S. Forces. In the Second World War era U.S. Army, 75mm howitzers were issued to airborne and mountain units. An airborne division, according to the organization of February 1944, had 3 75mm howitzer battalions, 2 glider field artillery battalions, 2 6-gun batteries each, and 1 parachute field artillery battalion, 3 4-gun batteries, in total 36 pieces per division. In December 1944, new tables of organization and equipment increased the divisional firepower to 60-75 mm howitzers. As an option, in glider battalions 75 mm pieces could be replaced with more powerful 105 mm M3. The only mountain division formed, the 10th, had 3 75 mm howitzer battalions, 12 pieces each. The gun was also used by some separate field artillery battalions. These included mule-packed field artillery battalions seeing service in Burma. The M1A1 also saw use during the Battle of Anzio, 39th Field Artillery Regiment. In the U.S. Marine Corps, under the E-Series Tables of Organization, 2, from April 15, 1943 Divisional Artillery included 3 75 mm howitzer battalions, 12 pieces each. The F-Series to from May 5, 1944 reduced the number of 75 mm battalions to 2, and the G-Series to removed them altogether, completing the shift to 105 mm and 155 mm howitzers. Although the G-Series to was only adopted on September 4, 1945, in practice in some divisions the change was introduced early in 1945. The M116, M1A1 resignated in 1962, is still used by the U.S. military for ceremonial purposes as a salute gun firing blanks. Other operators. 2 major Lend-Lease recipients of the M1 were United Kingdom, 826 pack howitzers, and China, 637 pack howitzers and 125 field howitzers. 68 pieces were supplied to France, and 60 to various countries in Latin America. In the British service, the howitzer was issued to 2 mountain artillery regiments, 2 air-landing light artillery regiments, raiding support regiment and was temporarily used by some other units. The gun remained in British service until the late 1950s. The 75 mm howitzer was also used by Australian forces, 2 mountain batteries and some other units. A single howitzer was airdropped in April 1945 to the 2nd, Italian, SAS Regiment, a special force composed by partisans with mixed political allegiance, Russian ex-POWs and Wehrmacht deserters, coordinated by Major Roy Farron. Baptized Molto Stanco, very tired in Italian, the gun was used in the course of Operation Tombola to harass enemy convoys driving up and down along Route 12 between Medina and Florence. On April 21, 1945, the howitzer was towed by means of a Willis jeep to the outskirts of Reggio Emilia, from where the Italian gunners initiated a shelling of the city that wrought panic among Axis troops. Believing that the arrival of Allied forces was imminent, the Germans and their fascist allies evacuated the city. The experience of the guns given to the Army of the Republic of China was particularly notable. After the loss of the mainland, the guns left behind were used both by the People's Liberation Army and exported to the Viet Minh. There is record of these guns being used at the siege of Dien Bien Phu and, presumably, in later conflicts. The type by virtue of its compactness also remained in use with the Roca's outlying island garrisons as coastal artillery. 153 minutes and 116 seconds were supplied to Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, and they were used until the 1980s. Croatian Army fields M116 howitzers as ceremonial cannon, 12 of which are still kept in service for that purpose. Additional 45 systems have been retired and no longer utilized by the Army, some stored in a local Army museums. In 2010 the M116 75 mm pack howitzer was used by the Turkish Army in operations against Kurdish separatists in southeastern Turkey. The howitzers have been used for avalanche control at several western U.S. ski areas. 3 howitzers are used by Norwich University's Norwich Artillery Battery, along with a Civil War-era cannon used for ceremonies. The howitzers are used in field training exercises for both the battery and the school's ranger company and the Corps of Cadets, as well as school traditions, such as at football game kickoffs. The University of North Georgia, one of 6 senior military colleges, also utilizes a pack howitzer at the base of their drill field. The piece is fired daily during reveille, retreat and during any special ceremonies honoring military graduates or active duty personnel. Variants. Howitzer variants. M1920, M1922A, M1922B, M1923B, M1923E1, M1923E2 prototypes. M1 the first standardized variant. Based on M1923E2 with minor changes. M1A1 variant with modified breech block and breech ring. M2 vehicle-mounted variant. Tube and breech from M1A1 were used. In order to provide a cylindrical recoil surface, the tube was fitted with an external sleeve. 197 built. M3 vehicle-mounted variant, like M2 but with recoil surface as a part of the tube. The M2 and M3 barrels were interchangeable. M116 post-war designation of the complete weapon. M120 post-war designation for saluting howitzers. Carriage variants. M1 dismantling box trail carriage with wooden wheels. M2A1, T2, T2E1, T2E2, T2E3 experimental carriages. M3A1 split trail carriage with firing base and pneumatic tires. M3A2 M3A1 with shield added. M3A3 M3A2 with different wheels and combat tires. M8 M1 with new wheels with pneumatic tires. Self-propelled mounts. Two nearly identical vehicle-mounted variants M2 and M3 were developed based on tube and breech of the M1A1, for use in the 75 mm howitzer motor carriage T47/M8. Both variants had a cylindrical recoil surface around the tube. In the M2, the surface was provided by use of a separately manufactured sleeve, while in the M3 it became an integral part of the barrel. M2 and M3 were fully interchangeable. These guns were mounted on the below armored vehicles. 75 mm howitzer motor carriage T47/M8 M2/M3 in mount M7. Landing vehicle tracked, A, 4 M3 in mount M7. Landing vehicle tracked, A, 5 M3 in mount M12. In addition, M1/M1A1 was mated to a number of other vehicles. Only the T30 reached mass production. Medium tank T5E2 M1A1. Experimental mount on Holt light tractor. 75 mm howitzer motor carriage T1, tank development chassis T2. 75 mm howitzer motor carriage T3, combat car M1 chassis. 75 mm howitzer motor carriage T17, combat car M1E3 chassis. 75 mm howitzer motor carriage T18, light tank M3 chassis, M1A1. 75 mm howitzer motor carriage T30 M1A1 in mount T10. 75 mm howitzer motor carriage T41, light tank M5 chassis. Ammunition. The gun fired fixed, heat M66, and semi-fixed ammunition, fitted with 75 mm cartridge case M5A1, Type 2, and Type I, accordingly. The propellant charge of semi-fixed ammunition consisted of base charge and 3 increments, forming 4 different charges, from 1, the smallest, to 4, the largest. Heat M66 shell penetrated about 91 mm of homogeneous armor at 0 degrees at any range.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.